Hello everybody and welcome back to the course. Since the beginning of this course, we have learned all about C# primitive data types such as booleans, integers, floats and strings. We have covered variables, and lately we have been discussing about conditionals. We believe that the best way to learn is to make cool little projects. So that is why in this video we're going to make a hot and cold number guessing game using everything that we have covered to this point. Anyways, enough talking and let's jump straight into this little project. So here I am inside of Unity and I'm going to create a new C# script that I will call hot and cold game. Once it has been created, I'll double click on it to open it up inside of my text editor. The very first thing that I'll do is to create an integer variable called random number. This variable will contain the number that the player will have to guess. We aren't going to give it a hard-coded value because we want to generate a random number each time we play the game. So we're going to do this inside of the start function that gets called once at the very start of the game. Okay, so it's challenge time. Pause the video here and research how to generate a random number between 0 inclusive and 100 inclusive. Alright, so the way we generate a random number in C# is like this. We will set the random number variable to be equal to random.range, and then inside of the parentheses is where you put in the range of values that the number can be equal to. So in our case, we want a random number between 0 and 100, so I will type in 0, 100. One thing to note is that when you're generating a random integer, the maximum value, so in this case the 100, is exclusive, which means that if we leave things like this, it will actually only generate a random number between 0 and 99. So if you want to correct this, I will just change the 100 to 101. And that's it. Now each time that we play the game, the random number variable will contain a random integer between 0 and 100. Okay, the next thing we'll do is to simply print a few lines to the user to introduce the game. So I'll start off by printing "Welcome to the hot and cold number guessing game." Then on the next line, I'll print "A random number between 0 and 100 has been chosen. Your goal is to find this number in the least attempts possible." Lastly, on a new line, I'll say "Enter in your guess" and then press the spacebar button to submit it. Good luck. Alright, with that done, we now need to have some way where the player can enter his or her guess. So I'm going to create an integer variable called guess. Now, unlike the random number variable that we want to hide from the player, we want the guess variable to be shown inside of the Unity inspector. So to do so, I will add the keyword public in front of it. We also want this number to only contain values ranging from 0 to 100. So we have already seen how to do this. We just need to add a pair of square brackets on top of this variable and then put range, and inside of parentheses we will type in 0, 100. Okay, so let's now save our script and go inside of Unity. Let's now remove any old scripts that we have got attached and let's drag and drop our new hot and cold game script. Let's now press play. So for now, we've got a random number variable that generates a random number between 0 and 100, but of course it is hidden from the player. We also have our guess variable that the player can modify inside of the inspector with this cool slider that ranges from 0 to 100, and we also have 3 introductory lines that are getting printed out to the Unity console. Like our game says, we want the player to be able to write his guess, then to press the space key and to see how hot or cold he is from the random number. So let's go back inside of our script and figure out how to do this. So for now in this course, we have been using the start function that gets called one single time at the beginning of the game. There is also this update function. This one here gets called every single frame, and there are about 30 to 60 frames that get drawn every single second. So this function gets called very often, and so that is why we use it whenever we want to update something on a regular basis. So in our case, we want to check when the player presses down the spacebar. We can't add that functionality inside of the start function because we need to check for any keys being pressed more than just once at the start of our game. We need to check for keys being pressed very often. So whenever you need to do something very often, you put the code inside of the update function. Okay, so now pause the video and try to research how to detect when the spacebar key has been pressed. Alright, so I hope you're able to find a solution. The way to do it is like this. We're going to make a simple if statement and the condition is going to be inputs.getKeyDown, and then inside of the parentheses you have to type in what key you want to check. So in our case, we will type inside of quotation marks the word space, and that's it. There are other ways to do it as well, so as long as your solution works, it's awesome. Now, any code that we put inside of the curly brackets will get called whenever we press down the space key on the keyboard. We're going to need to keep track of how many attempts the player has made. So I'm going to create an integer variable called number of attempts, and I'll set it equal to 0 by default. The first thing that we want to do when the player presses the space button is to add 1 to our number of attempts variable. So we could write number of attempts equals number of attempts plus 1, but a faster way to do it is to write number of attempts plus equals 1. The final step that we need to do to make our game work is to compare the guess of the player with the random number. Okay, so to start off, we need to check if the guess is the same as the random number, and if it is, then we want to print out to the player that he won, and we also want to print out the number of attempts it took him to win. Alright, so pause the video and try to do this on your own, and once you're done, we'll be back with a solution. We're simply going to create an if statement that will check if guess is equal to the random number, and if it is, then we will print out to the Unity console, you won, it took you, plus number of attempts dot toString plus attempts. So remember, here we are doing concatenation, which simply means that we're adding multiple strings together. Don't forget to convert the number of attempts variable into a string, otherwise it might give you an error message. Alright, so now let's save our script and go back inside of Unity. If we press play, we can actually type a number in and then press the space button, and we could try to find the random number. A quick note, click inside of the game window so that our script can detect the spacebar press. Alright, so for now this game is incredibly difficult. We need some kind of way to say to the player how hot or cold he is from finding the correct answer. So let's jump back inside of our script and finish the game off. So we have checked if the guess and the random number are equal, but now we want to add some other conditions, so let's create a else if statement. For the first condition, we want to check if the difference between the two numbers is less than or equal to 10. And if it is, then we want to print out boiling. The way we will do this is to put as a condition random number minus guess is less than or equal to 10. So we are taking the difference between the random number and the guess variable, and we're checking if that difference is less than 10. So let's imagine that our random number is 50 and we guess 45. Well, 50 minus 45 is equal to 5, and so this if statement will get triggered because 5 is less than 10. But there is one small problem. Let's say that our random number is still 50, but this time our guess is 55. Well, we're doing 50 minus 55, which gives us negative 5. And we don't really want to work with negative numbers. So that's a problem, but of course there is a solution to it. So I want you to research how to make any number, no matter if it's positive or negative, into a positive number no matter what. In other words, I want you to research how to get the absolute value of a number. So pause the video and try to figure this one out. Okay, so the way to do this is very simple. We'll just wrap our random number minus guess inside of mathf.abs for absolutes. So for example, if our difference between random number and guess is equal to negative 43, well, with the mathf.abs, it will transform it simply to positive 43. Alright, so now it's simply a question of copying the else if statement and pasting it multiple times. We'll of course change the number and change the text that gets printed out. So let's say if the difference is less than 20, we will print out very hot. If it's less than 30, it's hot. Less than 40, it will be quite hot. Less than 50, we will say neutral. Less than 60, we will put quite cold. For less than 70, we will print out cold. For less than 80, very cold. And finally, for less than 100, we will print out freezing. Of course, feel free to change these numbers as you like, this is just an example. And for a quick reminder, when we are saying less than or equal to 100, in this case it actually means between 90 and 100. Because remember, if we have arrived to this else if statement, it means that all the ones above it are false, and so the difference is not less than 90. Which means that when we are checking if the difference is less than or equal to 100, we already know that the difference is more than 90. Anyways, that's it, we have finished our hot and cold number guessing game. Let's now save our script and test it inside of Unity. We can now press play and start guessing away some numbers, then press the spacebar, and make sure that you're focused inside of the game window, otherwise it will not work. Once you press the spacebar, the game will tell you how hot or cold your guess is to the random number. So after a couple of attempts, voila, I was able to find the correct number. A huge congrats for have made this small game using all that we have learned in this course so far. You're making some truly remarkable progress as a C# game developer. A few videos ago we were discussing how to make a variable, and now we're already making some simple games. Anyways, there is a lot of exciting things to come, so I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!